Before starting the talk, there's an announcement. There is poison ivy on this land. If you know that you're susceptible to it, be advisable if you hike through the fields to have socks and jeans on. One particular area that I'm aware of is as you go the walk around the house and down toward the barn, in the area of the garden, on that path to the left of it, there is, and where the compost pile is, in that area and downhill and into the field, there is poison ivy. If you want to know what it looks like, we have a picture of it on the landing of the steps coming up to the kitchen. But there may be some at any place. So to be familiar with what it looks like and walk carefully. Some people are not susceptible to it, and also if one has been susceptible, one may not be now, or if one has not been, one may be now. If you do get it, we have some lotion that helps with the itching. This is day 3 of the June 87 7-day retreat. Have very frequent questions in meetings about thoughts. The constant, seemingly unending, ever-renewing, ever-continuing barrage of thoughts. And our conditioned reaction to it. What can I do about it? How can I get rid of this, get over it, be free of it? Maybe before that question, the reaction of discouragement, frustration or anger about it. Or maybe a reaction of fatalism, well, there's nothing I can do, this is human nature. I must live with it, accept it. Or the searching or demanding of a method to deal with it. And then there are also questions about what really is awareness. So maybe in looking at this problem, which is felt as a problem of the constant moving and chattering of thoughts, to maybe come upon what awareness is. Oh, we'll question it. We'll try to experiment with it directly here. In sitting or working, walking, lying down with this brain full of thoughts. Why does one want to Be free of these thoughts. Get rid of them. Is it because of the bother of it, the pressure of it? Maybe one gets headaches from it. Or the thought of freedom from thought. That thought beckoning as a very worthwhile and desirable state to aim for in the midst of this never-ending stream, the thought of being free of that stream. It's very similar to a thought of paradise. And as we are talking about it right now, does one see at this instant that quote unquote freedom from thought is a thought? Can one see that? A thought which, as it occurs in the mind, comes up from the memory of having heard about it, having thought about it before. As this thought, freedom from thought, comes up, and the idea, the thought of the possibility of gaining that, of attaining that, that gives energy, doesn't it? The energy of hope, and the energy to strive for that state, which at this instant is a thought. And getting there is also a thought. So is that why one wants to be free from thoughts, the bother of it, the annoyance, the burden of it, the chaoticness of it, and then the thought of freedom from this chaos? A thought to end all thoughts. You're laughing. Do you see what is going on? That thought is not ending with the thought of ending it. That thought has to be maintained, the thought of the ending of thought. Through the thoughts about method and how to get there and what to do and so forth. Why are thoughts a bother? And are all thoughts a bother? If one comes to a silent retreat with the intention of clearing the mind, experiencing emptiness or getting enlightenment, which one may have heard or may have had a glimpse of as being free from thought, then of course any kind of thought activity is going to be felt as a bother, as a hindrance, as failure, absence of success, absence of progress. The very enemy that stands between oneself and the goal, the thought of having no thoughts, the thought of emptiness, or whatever is the particular thought that goads the mind, attracts it. So can one see that coming here, sitting here with the goal of attaining a state of no thought or a state of a quiet mind automatically makes thoughts into something to be annoyed at, resisted, frustrated with, as a challenge to overcome, be done with. We also asked, is it all thoughts that one is annoyed with or frustrated or discouraged about? One can't answer these questions right offhand. One has to look as one sits or walks and thinks. Take a look at these thoughts. Be intimate and familiar, in touch with thinking, with what it actually is. If there are recurring topics, there is a central factor to all the thoughts and fantasies and imaginations. It's all the process of thinking. Thought, the process of thinking, is maybe our main vehicle of experiencing pleasure. To think how nice it was with him or her, how nice it could be with him or her, how good that food tastes, that maybe it'll be served today. It comes closer to mealtime when the blood sugar level is low. Thought can set the table more beautiful than any hostess. Remembrance can even provide the fragrances and tastes of food. The mouth starts to salivate at the thought of the favorite dish. Thought can paint over and over the picture of oneself, how one would like to be, or one thinks one is. We're talking right now about thought as a vehicle for pleasure. So if one thinks one is pretty important, pretty good looking, attractive, or talented to become something, to be something, and so forth, that thought brings pleasure and energy. That thought about me, myself, the idea and image of me, is thought. Do you see that? It is thought with which we nourish ourselves, with which we energize ourselves. Just as earlier we talked about the thought, about the freedom from thought, which we use to nourish the sitting, or walking, or standing, or eating. Someday, sometime, I'll be free from all this. The very pleasant thought. We could go on and on. One can see this for oneself. Thought as the vehicle for pleasure, entertainment. Think of the lovely trip one took, or the wonderful journey one is going to take. The sailing on the cool water when it's very hot. Skiing. Mind can entertain itself endlessly with these pleasurable thoughts. Also, in the same process, in the same way, thought is the vehicle for our pains, sorrows, fears, angers, jealousies, envies, greeds. I must have more. The thought of the more, and what it arouses physiologically throughout the body. Thought of jealousy, anger, what somebody did to one. Fear, what happened to me in the past, and the horrifying thought, this may happen to me again. Or something that hasn't happened to me yet, but it may happen to me in the future. The thought about dying and the fear of that. Thought about losing what one is attached to. And then the thought of being lonely. The imagination of being lonely, or when one is alone, the thought, I am lonely, can arouse all kinds of feelings of sorrow and pity, self-pity. So can one appreciate the power of thought to create pleasure and sorrow and fear? And the latter, the thoughts that create sorrow, fear, frustration, the thought how unsuccessful I am, how no good, how worthless. I'll probably never get to this state of freedom from thought, and the depression that thought can evoke physiologically throughout the body. It's not just the thought, the whole system responds, the whole physical organism responds to every thought. That's an amazing discovery to make. How one thought can completely affect the whole organism. It's finely attuned. Thought and organism are not separate from each other. It's a fine orchestration, mutual orchestration. So these thoughts that bring depression, undesirable emotions, I don't say undesirable as a judgment. When one judges them as undesirable oneself, I'm not judging. Painful emotion, let's say. Fearful states. Those thoughts we want to be done with. We don't want to occur. We want to be free from. Be able to control, overcome, or whatever it takes. The other kind of thoughts I don't think we think so much about when we want to be free from thought. Because if there happens to be a moment when there is no thought, when there is nothing, many people tell me time and time again that the usual reaction to it is fear, anxiety, running back into thoughts. Of course, already, fear wouldn't be there if there wasn't a thought, oh my God, it's empty, there's nothing. That thought again arouses the body. The orchestra starts tuning in. If there's no thought about no thought, then there's no fear. And there's no immediately clutching for a handle, reaching for something. So we must not be too sure that we really want, too certain that we really want that state of no thought. We just tell ourselves that and we dream of it or desire it. But when the mind is very sparsely occupied, the brain very sparsely occupied, it happens at times, isn't there very quickly a feeling of loneliness, emptiness, shallowness? And the birth of new thoughts to fill the loneliness, to fill the emptiness, so that something is going on. It's just like millions of people, whether driving a car or coming home. The first reach may be for that radio or TV to come on. And is it the same way with the stream of thinking that we complain about? Maybe it serves a function that we ourselves demand. The mind demands to be occupied for fear of no occupation. I'm not saying, please don't misunderstand, I'm not saying that no occupation is to be feared, that there's anything frightening or dangerous in it. Not at all. But we think so. Because we're so habituated to the fullness of the entertainment and thinking that the brain constantly pours out. The past, the present, and the future as all the product of thought. And isn't that what we live in? The thought-created past and future, much more than the present. If we think about the present, we're not living in the present. We're living in our thoughts. So, why be frustrated with it, or annoyed, or feeling that call to action to control the enemy? Why not really find out about thought? Listen. Be aware of it, what it's all about. We say impossible. And it's very difficult because while one thinks, there's no awareness. And yet there are moments of awareness. And at that moment, it comes into clear vision, awareness, what one has been thinking about the last moments, or that there's some retention there in the memory that can be seen. And as one looks, one will find that at the center of all of these trains and streams of thought is usually me, mine. Which is thought. And me is image, idea, thought made up of all of our past remembrances, impressions, fears, desires, goals. That's me, a thought complex, believed by thought to be something separate, something quite permanent, more permanent than this constant changing stream of thoughts is this thought complex of me. But that's the belief of thought, that it is permanent. Thought wants it to be permanent. So there's something to hold on to in this flux of change, which is thought and life in general. The creation of something permanent. Me and God. And whatever the culture and history and civilization has designated as permanent, which is thought. Can you see that? If one doesn't believe it is not permanent, if one believes in its permanency, but is inclined to question it, then look for it. Look for the me. Find out what it is. As it sits in the center of all of our trains of thought. Almost all of them. Not all of them. If one has thinking about finishing a house or a paper, or one's practical matters, there may be very little me, things that have to get done, a shopping list, and going out and buying the groceries. These thoughts may be quite technological and practical, and not infused with me. One can find this all out. You can't find this out if you try to throw all of this stuff out through thought. I said through thought because we did this in the beginning. We talked about it, trying to get rid of thought as thought. And as one is trying to do this, one will be aware how filled the mind is with a new train of thought about getting rid of thought. Then the question comes, well, is there some kind of a method to quieten the mind? That is helpful. Because, so people say, I can't see anything, I can't hear anything as long as this chaos is occupying the mind, or is the mind. Well, one has to try it. One can experiment with it. Because every spiritual, religious, meditative tradition offers its particular methods for thought control. The most customary one is linked with the breath, either focusing attention on inhalation and exhalation, or just on exhalation, or counting, either inhalation and exhalation, or just the one or just the other. Most of us have been through some of this training. And when I started working with people, which was still in the framework of a Zen center, that's what I did. Assign people, that was the function of the teacher, to assign practices. I never quite did it that way. I don't want to go into that. But there was the counting of the breath, and then just the experiencing of the breathing, dropping the counting, but being focused on that exclusively was the practice, not that it happened necessarily. And then the assigning of a koan or an inquiry like, who am I? And what occupied the majority of meeting time, or doksan as it was called in a fancy word at the time, was how can I keep the mind on the practice? Not that the practice was now the easy, uncomplicated, and effective means of controlling the mind, but again, how can I keep the mind on the practice? It's so distracted, so many thoughts, and people exhausting themselves and battling the thoughts in order to keep the mind on the practice. Not everybody. For some of us it's easy to to focus on something, to concentrate the mind. And it is something that can be learned, even though I must say over the years it seemed that the frustration with not being able to keep the mind on the practice did not diminish on the whole. Because the moment you assign yourself a practice to concentrate on, you have the battle on your hands just as before, only now using maybe the practice to battle the thoughts, using the counting to cut off thought. A battle, a conflict all the time. And no opportunity in this battle to understand thought profoundly, not just superficially, oh, this is thought, it's about me, I must get rid of it. It's a hindrance, it's this or that, but profoundly. Which I think can only happen if there is attention given to this whole process of thinking. Full attention. Not continuous or perfect or whole or whatever attention, but attention. As it happens. With no judgment of what it is that is there, of the thoughts, of the emotions, of the frustration or anger or jealousy. Because then there's a battle again, then there's conflict, when there's judgment. And when there's judgment and conflict, then there can't be attention. Or the attention is so distorted that I wouldn't call that attention anymore. If you want to find out anything about anybody or anything, you must look at it without judgment, don't we? Without interfering. If you ask a child who comes in crying, if you already assume what happened, because you know this child, you know he always gets into fights and probably got into a fight again or whatever. If you already know, or if you judge it, don't be a sissy or whatever, you can't find out what happened. The child must feel at ease in the presence of the parents to maybe tell, very much at ease. If it feels criticized, judged, condemned, then it won't tell. Or it will tell something else, and then we think it's lying. It's not lying, it's just adjusting to the situation, which we call a lie. So, same with thoughts. How can we, or with anything that's going on in this mind and body, from moment to moment, how can we find out about it if we already have an opinion about it? If we already are armed to go to war against it, to subdue it? And we've done this all our life. And our parents and their parents have also done it. It's in the air, this way of dealing with ourselves and with each other. To do it violently. Taking measures, interfering, fighting, conquering, overcoming, subduing, without ever the space or the inclination or interest to find out what it is that one is fighting. And that one can only find out if there's no attitude about it, no opinion, no traditional posture for or against it. If this way of perceiving or looking at things comes into being, trying to find out what it is without any animosity or belligerence or preconceived idea, then what happens? In the presence of anger, frustration, and so forth. Find out. Our traditional response to whatever happens inside and out is also labeling it, knowing what it is, giving it a name, a category, which is separation. We don't know what something is if we know the name. Not necessarily. If the name is seen as just a word, then it may not stand in the way of being in touch what the name points at or stands for. But when there's pain, somebody talked about the excruciating pain while sitting. And I'm not saying it's good or you have to have pain, or so please, there's none of this kind of a teaching here. But if there is pain, one has already called it pain. And that word has immense associations in the brain. We've learned since we've been little that pain is something bad and sad and dangerous and to be alleviated, to be pills taken against it, and so forth. To be feared or to be hated. And all with that word pain, all is set in motion. It's a very, very intricate, instantaneous network of associations throughout the brain and then connecting with the whole organism. So, the word pain is not what is hurting. What is hurting cannot be examined, felt, touched, listened to, whatever word you want to use, without the word. Not knowing what it is, not knowing knee, right side, left side, back, or front, head, or whatever. Of course one knows, but put aside what you know. So there can be an in touch with itness that's not guided or influenced by the word, by the knowledge about it. Then for the first time, to one's amazement, one may find that pain isn't pain, but one has thought it is. And with the thoughts not there, it's something different. With the thoughts coming back, it is sort of a collage evolving. Thought adds to the pain and to the tension considerably, immeasurably. So after going through all this now, what is attention? listening to. Just simple listening. That simple listening, and that's not thought, is it? Is it? That's not thought, is it? It's just what it is. But the brain may already have said bird or birds, bird calls or twittering. I don't know what all of these words are, but and can one see right now that the word bird or bird song, bird call is not that. That is not the word. That's not the thought. It's just what it is. It's real. We don't need that word. It's what it is. The best thing is not to say anything, but to listen. And to see clearly, not to condemn the thought or the word bird. Why should it be condemned? To see what it is. And to see that the word bird is not what's actually going on there. The word is something that's going on in the brain. The sound of the bird is going on, goodness knows where. If one is really listening, one loses a little bit the sense of direction. It's everywhere. To place it into a direction, one has to think again. Is it outside? Is it on a tree? Is it north, west, south, east? That's thought. And when there's just listening, because one needs to hear, one is passionately interested to simply hear. Then quiet. Can one observe too that the word crow, one recognizes that bird call, the word crow. May arouse a reaction. I don't like crows. Somebody told me this. Observing, listening to a bunch of crows and all of a sudden realizing there was a reaction against it, an annoyance at this raucous sound of the crows. We do this. The brain is constantly evaluating. Do I like it? Don't I like it? Do I want it? Don't I want it? Bird calls usually are not reacted against. They're reacted for. I love it. I wish there'd be birds all the time so I could pay some attention. I'm not saying it's bad or good, it's a reaction. That's what happens. One can see that. One can become intimate with this instrument which is the brain. And just the listening without the supply of name and reaction for or against, that's simple perception or awareness. The moment I say, there comes up the thought, I like that, I want it, I want to keep it. That's thought and that's me in there. And at this instant where the me comes into play, wanting or not wanting, there's the awareness of the sound of the bird is gone. Or it's very peripheral. It's just sort of a sensory input, very peripheral. What's important now is that I like it, that I know the name of this bird. I know it's a cardinal or this or that. Actually, the word cardinal could just be supplied by the brain. But still, the word cardinal is not that sound. You see that, don't you? But if I feel pretty good about myself because I remember cardinal, then more is happening. The image is being boosted. The image of myself as a bird knower. As knowing something. I know a bird to call. And the clinging to that feeling that it gives. It gives a good feeling to see oneself as knowing something. All of this is open to observation, to insight. In awareness, the way the word is used here, there is no me in the center. It's just the listening, the sensing of the cool breeze, sensation in the body about some tension or pain or heart beating, the breath throbbing in the fingers of the pulsating of the blood. All of that awareness needs no me to function. It needs no one to bring it about, to control it, to keep it going. It happens on its own. Sitting this morning eating breakfast and having heard the sound of a cardinal in the meeting room earlier, I saw in the distance a little red spot down the road, and the word cardinal came up. And this little red spot seemed to form itself into a cardinal. And then looking again, this time probably without the word, what emerged was a red reflecting sign. It wasn't a cardinal. It's amazing to see that we all go through this all the time. You can have a direct demonstration how the word affects the perception, the thought. One can think one sees what one thinks. And only if there's taking a second look, we say, let's take a second look. And that second look free from thought, one may see what's actually there. And see the transformation under one's own eyes. One person once told me what was the jolt of her life in this kind of work was when she walked through the woods and stepped on a piece of what she thought was a piece of shit, and the revulsion against it, annoyance and all that stuff that was set in motion, and then taking another look and seeing it was a piece of bark, and the clearing of the revulsion, the reactions immediately, and this thing looking quite different now. And the appreciation of the power of thought and its associations, and the what shall I say? The importance, the necessity of seeing clearly so as not to be deceived. And the deception is total. The emotions, the reactions, the actions one takes, based on what one thinks one has seen and heard. Not knowing what's actually there, which may be quite different. Not just in a reflector cardinal down there on the road, but in the person we live with, we work with. Listen. What is that? Does one have to say airplane? Brain supplies it so instantly. But can one see that it's a word and not stop listening because of the word airplane? Listen again freshly. Not knowing what this is and not relying on the knowledge, and therefore all the senses wide open. Not wanting something of it, it can't give us anything. It's just there. And in the listening, does that need me? Does it need my likes and dislikes, or is there just the brain, in order to assure the safety of the organism, which is its function, wants to be sure it knows what this is, so it doesn't mean danger. That's its function, to know what something is and to quickly bring up out of the files what it is and whether it constitutes a danger or not. During the war, when we heard that sound, we took to the basement. A single plane meant danger. Right now, you'll have to take to the basement. Even though the association may come up, you can see that. It's clear, it's not a warplane, although it could be. There's a chance in a million it could be. It's very unlikely right now here in Springwater. Thank God. So, can one listen without taking shelter? Look without taking shelter in anything. See the shelters that the brain is constantly offering, because that's its function. But realizing it's not needed. And also, this is getting late. Maybe we can talk more about this tomorrow. I was just going to say briefly, to keep the organism alive is one thing. That's the brain's primary function, for which it has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years, to keep the organism alive as long as possible, surviving. With the human brain, there came the new possibility of creating the idea of oneself. I don't think any animal has the idea of itself that it then has to protect. It's just very simple. Brain functions to protect the organism. But we can create the idea, the image of ourselves, and fall in love with that image, with that picture, with that creation. And the brain will protect that, the survival of the image, with the same means and mechanisms as it protects the physical organism. We can verify this, test it, discover it when we're afraid for what somebody will think of us, or what somebody will do to us. We've done something wrong, we're in for trouble. Then that fear for survival of the image triggers the same intestinal, anal, stomach, heart, muscular tensions and functions, as if there was an actual threat to our life, to our physical life. All of these mechanisms set into motion so we can run or attack, have lots of energy, no extra bulk. That's why one feels like eliminating when there's fear, there's diarrhea. To make the body light, not to feel like eating because no extra weight, one can't run as fast. One has just loaded up one's stomach. When there's fear, animals that are on the flight or watching, they don't copulate at that moment. And in a human being, if it's consumed with fear, there's no interest in sex. When we think, well, what's wrong with me? I'm not interested in sex. But one is afraid of something, of somebody. And the organism, led by the brain, prepares for the emergency. But it's just the emergency for an image, not for the whole body. Even though the organism suffers from all of this. When one doesn't run, when all systems are made ready to run, then I don't know what physiologically happens. Certainly one feels miserable, shaky, heart pounding. Can one be aware of this when it happens? Without judgment? Given a lot of words and explanations here, but the words and explanations and descriptions aren't the actual occurrence, the actual incident. So how can one be in touch with what's actually happening from moment to moment? And not just be caught up in the words about it, or the words away from it. Listening is always fresh from the beginning, from the start, new. Not how did I do it last minute or yesterday. That's gone. Listen. He has to know what it's about, we don't. We will end here for today.